And it's turned into the photo I use for professional stuff, which is a little bit interesting. But I just cut all the people out, and I was probably not very sober at that moment. It's the one time I ever went to a music festival. Anyway, so just a little bit about me to start. So I was born and raised in central Cape Town. I now live in a suburb called Hout Bay, which is a very interesting place socially, but I live on a small holding with lots of farm animals, which is very nice. After school, I studied at the University of Cape Town. I did psychology and English. I wasn't ready to be an adult, so I moved on to Creative Academy, where I did a Bachelor of Arts in Interaction Design. After that, or kind of during my last year, I interned at a startup. Was a sports app about, they were trying to make an athlete social media platform, as many startups do. It did not take off, unfortunately. Then I moved on and I became a product designer at Nona Digital. So I started as an intern and I ended up being a lead product designer. And recently, Nona was bought by Yoko. I don't know if you guys know about it. Yoko is a payments company. They started with little card machines. They're very iconic blue card machines. And the whole idea around Yoko is making payments easy for anyone in the world. Eventually, at the moment, it's in South Africa, and especially focusing on underdogs. So their whole concept is like that guy at the market. How can he sell his, his bags of oranges to anyone? Because especially in South Africa, there's a huge problem with theft and being mugged on the streets. So a lot of people don't carry cash, and this was becoming a blocker in the cities here. So they made these little card machines. It hooks up to your phone, super easy. But Yoko's growing really fast, and I'm in the online payments division. So most of the projects I'm working on are around online payments. But I literally started there 3 weeks ago. It's been a very stressful time. So yeah, other things I'm into, very into animals. I actually horse ride competitively, made it into provincial teams last year. I cycle and run and spend lots of time on the mountains, and I love food and photography and plants and crafts and reading. So that's kind of me. I'm a little bit of everything. And just wanted to mention some of my favorite parts of the job. So I love, as a product designer, I really love understanding the problem. So we like to spend time really unpacking as a group a problem. This is a lean canvas. As you can see, it's got like problem, solution, what's our advantages here, who are our customers, all those things. You kind of want to get that understood. Then I love research. I love diving into things, doing, competitor analysis, looking at other apps for any given project, really understanding and unpacking the users. Flows are also a favorite part for me. I'm an organization freak, as everyone at work likes to remind me all the time because I'm bossing everyone around. So I love this part because it's very organized, working out user flows. How are people moving through our products? I also love design systems, again, for the organizational side of things. And user testing, super fun. It's always amazing to see the work you've done in front of someone for the first time. And even if that person is your mom or your sister, like seeing someone else's perception of something you designed is just amazing. And then, of course, the reason I'm here is my real favorite part is optimizing processes and workflows. So I'm just going to set the scene on how I actually really got into this. When I started at Nona as an intern, I was exposed to a lot of developers for the first time. Nona was a development agency, so design was kind of just there because, well, how people see us in the industry. We're just that necessary thing just so we can quickly, make it look okay. Obviously, that idea has changed in all the developers' minds who worked with me and our team. They realized, hang on, designers are really important. But in the beginning, I kept overhearing things, like at the lunch table or whatever. I'd hear someone say, yo, I don't know which ones are the latest UI, or it looks cool, but I don't know how it works, or everything in Sketch and Figma is a mess. And I said Sketch because when I started, Nona was using Sketch, and we very quickly moved over to Figma, like everyone else. So when hearing those things, I had an idea. I said, we have a problem. Developers don't know how to use our design files or how to find what they need. And so I asked, how might we design in a way that allows any teammates to find what they need and understand what they are looking at? So I, of course, treated this problem like I would treat any design brief. So I dived into some research. Myself and a colleague, Sandy, who also studied with me actually, we decided to conduct some interviews with our developers to really understand things like their key frustrations and the experiences they currently were having, how developers would ideally like the project or a piece of a project handed over to them, the main problems developers are facing when they're using our files, and what developers expect and need from our files. Because the questions we were hearing in a casual context clearly meant something was wrong. So we got a lot of data. We only did 5 interviews, and as you can see, we had a lot of sticky note points to sift through. And some of the key insights were things like these. Design documents are often seen as specs for development, which means they're really important. And in terms of finding things, people found things difficult and a little bit all over the place. The line between what is current and what is experimentation was blurring for a lot of the developers. Properly named styles and components were making or make things easy. So some people recognized things they really liked, which was also valuable. Some design files are easier to work with than others. There needs to be a single source of truth. So the developers realize that the design can function as that single source of truth. Then annotating wireframes to explain what is happening is great. I'm not sure if there's something I didn't notice or if changes have been made. So we took all of this into account. We also looked at some of the files that they were looking at. So, I mean, I don't think these are too bad. They're somewhat organized. You can see this has some headings and stuff, but like, what is this? Anyway, and also, I mean, this is zoomed out quite far, and I don't really know where I want to go or where the thing is I'm looking for if everything's so small and spread out. So we came to some design values, and this is something we use at Nona. It's something we're introducing at Yoko as well. It's kind of to live by these when you're designing. So the first is be mindful and intentional. Question why you are doing something a certain way or for any given reason. It's like taking a moment to ask yourself why. Why have I done this like this? You become more efficient in no time when you start doing this. Consistency is always key. Human brains are programmed to recognize patterns. Use this to our advantage in your work by creating patterns and forming habits. It's kind of what a lot of these things I'll be sharing are about. It's like you just got to make it a habit. Remember your users. So many of us are probably UX minded people. And so whenever we're designing something, we think about the user of that thing. But we need to be mindful that our teammates are users of our files. And then my favorite one is the hit by a bus phenomenon. What if you're hit by a bus tomorrow? And like, that sounds a little bit crazy. What are the chances? I've actually personally had a bad horse riding accident where I was unable to work for a long time. I couldn't drive, I couldn't read properly, I couldn't see properly. So what if this happens? Someone's going to have to pick up your work wherever you left it and make sense of it. So leave your work how do you like to receive it from someone else. Right, so I'm going to dive into some of my best practices. And the first one is the one that on Twitter, especially, you see many things about. So it's name your layers. Okay, wait. Name your layers. Name your layers. This is one of the most impactful habits to pick up because this means something and this means nothing. So this is something I like to show in contrast, especially when I'm working with a designer who's like, oh, but I don't have the time. How quick is it to know what you can probably start to picture this design? You can see some things happening. I mean, I don't even remember what the screen looked like, and I took this screenshot earlier today. So that's kind of a visualization of why I find this important. It just also makes things very easy to find, and it makes you group things in meaningful ways. So the next one would be always and only use styles. Creating color palettes for your projects, text styles, and effect styles is really important. And don't forget you're allowed to change them. You're allowed to add more. Like I often get criticized by my team saying you're being prescriptive, you're writing rules, and I try to say, but everything is flexible. The reason I like to do this is by limiting yourself, you'll force yourself to be conscious of the decisions you're making while you design. This screenshot over here is from a file I got from another design agency when a project was handed over to us. These were all the grays used in the design. The developers were so confused. They had no idea what gray was for what and why there were so many of almost the same gray. And if the person who had been designing had just named some grays, they probably wouldn't have used so many, which would save the developers a lot of hassle trying to figure out which one is supposed to be for what. Then the next thing would be making components. So my thing is always, did you just copy paste that card? You should probably make it a component. Did you just change a part of that component? You should probably make it a variable. Save future you some time and make developers happy, or anyone else who's got to use your file, by pausing to make anything you use more than once a component. And then just a quick note on styles and components. Obviously, not everyone here now is necessarily a UI designer or a UX designer, but creating a page or a few pages to house and visualize your styles is so helpful for yourself and for anyone else. Obviously, if you're using design systems, this gets like huge. It can be one file with multiple pages, but having a visual and organizing it out just means it helps you in your efforts to be consistent. It helps you in your efforts to be mindful. This was just a screenshot from a very quick project I did, which was literally just a landing page for a crypto project. And as you can see, I had very few things, so I popped it onto one page. Sometimes I'll separate styles and components out, but it's just nice to have them all in one place. Then another thing I really like to do is use the sizing or spacing rule in my designs. So I just took some screenshots from this file, which I'm also actually happy to share with everyone. But I try to use a convention when I'm designing so that I can kind of save my brain some time. So I use the 8-pixel rule. So you'll see here, I just clicked on a few things and stole their various measurements, and that's an auto layout. There's some text sizing and things like that. Obviously with text though, you're going to have a few more, but it was just an example. But the multiple of 8 or division of 8 it limits the amount of numbers my brain has to think about. So as soon as I need to space something out, I just pick from these numbers, and it very quickly becomes like automatic in your head. You just go, oh, I kind of want a big space that's like 40 pixels, great. Or I want a small space that's just 8. So that's something I really like to do, which I've found has actually sped me up so much. And then auto layout everything. Guys, I love auto layout. It is my favorite thing. It really speeds things up so much. Future you will be so grateful that you've used auto layout, learned it, mastered it. If any copy changes need to be made or elements need to change, it's so quick to do this without needing to reshuffle everything. You know, if someone says, oh, Flip, we forgot to put some text in, easy peasy, you just drop it in there and your screen just adjusts correctly. Especially with clients who are undecisive or things like that. Even in a session, you can just move things around and it doesn't get all crazy, which is nice. I mean, the worst thing for me is using PowerPoint or something like that, and then you move one thing and the entire document kind of just messes out. You don't need that. Figma's auto layout feature is just so amazing, and I also always use it in all of my components. So just a little tip, I really like to use some plugins to speed things up. I've got these 4 were kind of my top 4. So there's Batch Styler, lets you edit your styles in bulk. So say you decide I want a different hue to my blues. You can do that with Batch Styler in just a few clicks. You don't have to click into each style. Find and replace. I mean, I've used this so much. For instance, if you type Bitcoin wrong all over a crypto app, which is what I did once, find and replace will let you just search that mistake and you can fix it everywhere. It's the same as kind of spell check in Word. Sorter is also great. If you've named all your layers beautifully, but your layer panel is a bit funky, Sorter will help you there. And Styler quickly generates styles from a selection of layers on your artboard. It'll take the name of the layer and use that as the style name. So you don't have to individually click everything and create it. Then I'm going to move on to file organization. So the first thing, I'm kind of going to start at the top here. Make use of a good cover page. And this is especially great if you're sharing your files around. I like to use that first page in my file as a help and guide for anyone who might use the file. So things you could include is like a thumbnail like this, which you can set as the cover. So in your Figma home, I'll just jump quickly. You know, you've got all these covers. Much neater than that is having a nice cover. A frame with a brief about section, an index of the pages in your file, which initially sounds quite strange because you might say to me, but they're always sitting in the side panel. What if you send this to a Figma noob, someone who's not familiar with design software? They're not going to recognize to look on the left or look on the right in the panels. So if we have a page where they can go, super handy for them. Then a list of prototype links. Figma's prototyping features with creating multiple flows on one page is really great. But again, for people who don't know about it, it's very handy to have your various flow links in there. And then something we're using quite a lot at Yoko is a list of links to other places in the file. So when your team gets really big, there might be a Slack channel or a Notion document or a link to a dev ticket on whatever ticketing software they're using, or FigJam links or general links. You know, why not house this all and really let your Figma file be that single source of truth that the developers really want, or your project managers really want, because I've also worked on projects where project managers want a space like that. Then, so diving into the page thing, structuring and naming your pages purposefully is really great. So determining a logic for your page naming is very dependent on the project. and you and how you want to work. These are just a few examples. So pages could be named according to feature flow or user or device or whatever else you want to split things up into. We can just use pages to really help us organize things at a very high level. So this one on the left, you can see there was a lot going on here. And there's V1s and V2s, which I'm not a huge fan of. But this project was massive. It was actually for Engen, which is one of our biggest fuel companies in South Africa. And then this is a very simple one. It's just landing page and some prototypes. And this one again, also app screens, a pro screens and a website. So it's really dependent what your project is, but I really like doing this. And side note, if you haven't noticed by now, I love emojis. So I like to use them as well. It just makes the file a little bit less intimidating as well and draws attention to all the pages. Then I mentioned this already, kind of, but arrange things on your artboard neatly. Something like this is just not that great to look at. Just like page structure, think about how you can group things together. And for UIs, the best is to group things according to a user journey, I found. But other kinds of designs like social media posts, or if you're designing invitation to something, you can group things by campaign or purpose or dates or platform, however you want to, but it's really nice if you can group things together. Because my next suggestion is make use of some big ass headings. We have found this was the biggest change or most impactful change we made at Nona after our little survey with the dev. They love this thing. So when you're zoomed out, you can easily see the sections that all the frames have been grouped by. It's really clearly marking out those sections, helping anyone who jumps on to move around faster. Then annotate your designs. This is where things get heated. People always say, do I really need to do this? And I'm always going to say it really depends. And to keep in mind those design values I mentioned earlier. So the whole thing around annotating your designs, because, I'm sure some of you are sitting there now going, what are you talking about? Why would I do this? So what it should be is useful for you, useful for anyone else looking at your designs, clear and concise, a way to start or continue communication, and your voice if you can't be there. What it shouldn't be is the biggest mission ever, or time consuming, long winded, or done because I just told you to do it. So, the way we've done it at Nona and now implementing at Yoko is we've developed a few different annotation blocks in our projects. I like to normally put them next to my frames. So, this is just an example. This project was actually very interesting because I needed to use it because we were doing design for a client who didn't have budget to develop this yet, and they didn't know who was going to develop it, and they hardly even had budget to pay me. So I tried to write some developer notes. I tried to write some of my ideas and expansions on the ideas. And these ones here are what we're currently using at Yoko. Just, being able to quickly annotate things. And you might be saying, what about comments in Figma? Because that's a thing. We have found that a lot of people, especially non-tech people, so a client or your CEO or someone like that, doesn't necessarily know what the comments are. And we actually use them as anchor points in our files. You drop it there, they can see it, and then we just attach the comment thread to the note. So they can be anything, brief notes, dev notes, style notes, anything really. Flagging issues is one I've actually been using quite a lot recently because I'm currently reviewing a lot of our mobile app products. So another one this is very new. I'm sharing with you guys some cutting edge Laura, thanks. This is my latest high-level card, and I'm just gonna switch to the actual design so I can show you how this works. So I just set this up as like a base component so that I can write a title, add a description, link in what I need to. And in our projects, because they're active, I've put in little tags so we can say design is in progress and copy update is required. This in a big team on a very active project is so useful because anyone who comes in can see what's going on. If we went and said design is done, but copy update is required, the devs can start working and they know that they're going to still need to do some changes to copy, but the design's unlikely to change. And then with this also, don't need to be too prescriptive. Everything can be turned off or on. So you could turn off the description and turn off the links. Simple, one component that I can use in multiple ways. So this is just a little example of how one of the other designers on my team used this. They took those big cards, put them on the side, and then they actually used a smaller version of the card and turned all the other parts off, just used the title to mark out the specific sections of a flow. So here's a little tip. Something I've actually been working on a lot this week was creating an annotations and template library. Once you've really started using things like big headings and creating and setting up thumbnails and annotating your files in the way that's useful to you, you can create your own little library of components. And, here's your library that you could have on in all of your files, which becomes a pattern for yourself to use. And anyone who works with you regularly would recognize the annotations you're using and the way you're setting up your files. So what about FigJam? I haven't mentioned FigJam at all. I do use it a heck of a lot. It's got everything built into it already. That's kind of the nature of the whiteboarding tool, I suppose. But FigJam's doing it so well. All these new features that have been coming out are just epic. You've just got to use the pieces with the same values and principles that I've gone through so far. For instance, I just created this in about 2 minutes before this presentation because I realized that I hadn't mentioned FigJam. But you can use all the shapes and the shapes and sticky notes as annotations. You can use the cool stamps to indicate things, and this new grouping things together feature, I'm really loving it. So you can group stuff together to indicate those groupings of ideas or things you're doing. So yeah, thank you. I hope that was good.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for your TED talk. Well,
Sorry, it was a TED talk.
all right, thank you so much. Okay, so let's see, guys. See, I will have a couple of questions, but let's see. So drop your questions on the chat. Anything around setup. Okay, so yeah, thank you, Laura. I love your auto layout tool. Yeah, Lottery says thanks. Any questions? Any questions, Lord Sweet? Any questions? Shane? Laura, any questions? Laura?
I feel like it might have been quite a dump of information.
All of us will have to go back and go through the recordings again. Okay, the questions are most of us are thinking about. Okay, so it was a bit easy to grasp. like talking about the naming convention, but you didn't really give us like guides as to how you would recommend. You know, like so one reason why people don't name for their pages now, like the what pattern to use. So maybe one
Mm.
suggestion would be like to create a pattern and comment about that's the pattern you use and consistent and work.
So a little bit more about naming.
Yeah.
So it's such a personal thing, really. I think the first step for me is or was definitely avoiding auto name things and then trying not to include versioning in my names. You know that the classic is your old Photoshop file or your Illustrator file that had like final underscore final. This is the final. You know, um, so
Yeah.
um, it's so dependent on a project. I just name everything, and then at a more granular level, for example, in auto layout, I like to use row and column for groups where I don't really know what the meaning is supposed to be. You just, the only reason you've grouped something together is because it's supposed to be a row of items or a column of items. And then when it comes to pages, I can't, I don't know. Can you be a little bit more specific in what I can blabber on about?
Small like the files but um,
Do you
it's
mean the frames?
the frames, yeah, frames.
Ah, okay. So, um, oh, now the cat is here meowing. I'm sorry if you can hear her. So, I normally will start with if we've got a login flow, I'd call all the pages in the flow login, and then put a forward slash and go, cool, this is the login empty screen, and then this is the login filled screen, login unsuccessful screen. So you've got that login forward slash, then the specific screen it is in that section. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with going login 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just some kind of indication of how those, why, if you name a frame, you automatically are going to take that moment to be conscious of what you're going to name it. So it's up to you to decide how, but I really like using the forward slash to kind of denote a step in a user flow.
Okay, all right. So two. So one is so like the first page being the cover page, then you showed other items that had like page, other links. Are those still part
Mm.
of the cover process?
Let me just share again. Cool. So this is actually the one for this file that I made. So if I do
Yeah.
that, you can see here the like design is there. But then obviously there's other stuff on this page. So I just take that one. The best is to use a 16:9 ratio for this. And I'm gonna share this. I can share this with you, and then you can inspect everything. But you just right click it, and well, now it's set already. So you set it as your thumbnail, which is really fun, and it just means that looks nice on any preview of this in Slack or Twitter or wherever you're going to share it. It'll just show that. But if you land on that first page, you've got these other parts as well.
All right. Cool. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Plus, final question for me. Anyone has a question there? So what's your take? So we had a session last week around design systems, library, library or kits. Take on working with tokens, like using tokens for
Oh,
your
I
component.
love tokens. I didn't want to get into it too much on this because this was not about that. I feel like I could talk about that for hours. I think though, with all these cool new features coming out, with all the stuff Figma's doing, all the stuff a lot of the plugins are doing, we run the risk of overcomplicating things a little bit. But when it comes to big projects and anything that's going to be developed, I think the tokens concept is so important for designers to understand, because it's how developers or good developers will create things. And if we're speaking the same language as the technical people, it just makes our communication so much better. So the Figma tokens plugin is amazing. I love it completely, like obsessed with it. So yeah, my take on it is it's great.
All right. So thank you so much. From anyone asking for, can you share?
Cool. Yes. What's the best way for me to share this? Shall I just share the link in this chat?
Yeah, I guess so.
Just need to make sure it's available for everyone. Cool. Don't judge me if I forgot to name something.
Okay. All right. I would have loved if we had more questions, since we are quite few. So we don't want to you, and questions would sweeter. So you
Cool.
of now, thank you so much, Laura. I would like to maybe you're about to talk about, let you know when.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It's very exciting. I'm very excited to connect with people all over the continent. It's very cool.
All right, thank you. I know about Yoku, yes, fintech company, and I've been looking at Yoku. Basically, we are trying to get information. Don't worry, but I know about Yoku. See you next. Don't know showing up, and yes, peace out. Good night, guys.
Cool. Thanks. Bye.